prophet draws the spirit of prophecy upon himself by his piety. But Shemot makes a serious error by stating that no such requirement for a prayer applied to Moses. In his own argument, Shemot refers to Psalms chapter 90, verse 10, and erroneously quotes the text. Let's go find it. Chapter 90, verse 10, Psalms. The span of our life is 70 years. And Rashbi says, the days of our years. The days of our years does not convey the accurate meaning of the text, because the complete statement has the grammatical relationship between the subject and predicate to be days instead of years that are 70. The current translation reads, the span of our years, which is more grammatically correct by word choice than the quotation in the Zohar. In this particular Zohar, that may be the error, and I told you that there would be errors early on in this series, and I may refer to it even when we find them, that you've got to be careful about some of the English translations because they'll miss it. Because grammatically speaking, what it says in that version of the Tanakh, or that version of the Zohar, is that the days were 70. No, the span of years, the number of years, 70. Days is not a grammatically correct translation of the original. So be careful when you read a Zohar like this one, or others that may be printed. Be careful. You've got to look at the text. Okay, so the error might not be Shimmon's, and the meaning is clear that 70 years are the extent of life under ordinary circumstances. The truth of it, 2,000 years ago, remains the truth today, with a typical lifespan of most people being 70 years. The error Shimon actually makes is to say that Moses did not require a prayer for prophecy. And he argues his point about Habakkuk needing a prayer before prophecy. The very first verse in the psalm that Rabbi quotes disproves this claim. A prayer of Moses, the man of God. So here is David citing a prayer of Moses, whom Rashbi said did not need to do this, the same as Habakkuk. That's why I tried to tell him, oh, hold on, Rashbi, hold on. But go ahead. We'll come back to it. There's nothing unique about a prayer for a prophet. And Moses is being attributed with prayers as the man of God, which is clearly explained as an epithet for a prophet when he is in the upper chamber of prayer. But out in the city, as a prophet, Moses did not need to pray for something to happen. We'll talk about that one. So he's right. The fault of this digression reveals itself in the vagueness of Shimon's explanation. It's a long time ago. We've gotten better at intellectually thinking things through. It's not his fault. He was trying to impress upon the others that prayer was the path to receiving prophecy for every prophet, and that this prayer is private, because Habakkuk turned to the wall. Turning to the wall was a matter of turning one's attention from the world to an inner retrospective of prayer in a private manner, with Hashem as the only one who needs to hear it. The relevance of the argument of this digression of the discourse is about to come back to the passage of Torah that opened the lesson. Moses followed the Lord's guidance to take the Israelites south into the wilderness of the Sinai, rather than go due east into Canaan that was ruled by the Philistines. That area was ruled by the Philistines between there, who took possession of the land in the absence of the tribes of Israel who were captive in Egypt. Okay, the passage to the promised land became more complicated because it didn't go that way. I'm trying to set you up for what's happened and why. Because they didn't want to go through the land of the Philistines because, as it says, there would be war. And they just go back to Egypt, so take them south. So the Lord told Moses to take them south. Throughout all of that journey, Moses prayed and followed the Lord's guidance. The prophecy that guided Moses and the Israelites was the vision of the pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, as it said at the end of that segment. There really is no mystery to the source of such a vision, and there was nothing mystical about the appearance of a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. It was always ahead of the Israelites. The entire geographic region southeast of Egypt, through the Sinai Desert and south into Saudi Arabia, is a volcanically active mountain range. The northwest region of Saudi Arabia is one of the most uninhabitable places on the planet, with lava fields and active calderas still flaming and smoking today. There may not be the level of activity that was likely to have been occurring in the time of Moses, but the proof of how the text tells the truth is present. It is undeniable that there have been several eruptions in recent recorded history, but there have not been enough of them to draw attention to how this passage in the Torah explains the choice Moses made to take the Israelites south by southeast rather than directly to the land of Canaan to the east, as Pharaoh would have expected, and as the Philistines would have repelled them if they had. Although a mass migration of 600,000 plus people would have been overwhelming for the Philistines, they were not equipped for warfare. Not until later. Taking the Israelites directly into Canaan would have been leading them into a slaughter. The Lord spoke to Moses and told him to follow the pillar of fire and smoke in the distance to the southeast along the east bank of the Red Sea. There would have been a mountain that was volcanic and most likely erupting. It would have been visible as a fire in the distance at night and a cloud of smoke rising up into the sky in the daytime. Every one of the Israelites have been told to keep going in that direction, no matter what happens. The sign of this volcanic eruption was Hashem's way of keeping the Israelites from getting lost, and the area where they were traveling was less populated than the region due east of Egypt. God's plan of escape for the tribes of Israel would test them all greatly by taking them along the most indirect route to the Promised Land. They had been in Egypt for 450 years, and they needed to learn what they did not learn while enslaved by the pagan pharaohs. The revelation of this understanding appears in the next segment of the Shemot with the discourse of the nature of Yetro. The father-in-law of Moses is identified as having been a priest of Pharaoh who repents upon seeing Moses and the Israelites successfully escaping the clutches of the Pharaoh he supposedly served, while Moses was declaring to have let the Israelites go by the order of Hashem. It was not Moses who made the demands. The direction was from Hashem, the God of the Hebrews. Moses was the mouthpiece. Because Moses was able to prophesy without being told what to say as a result of meditation and prayer that all other prophets were known to do. Shimon Bar Yoshi makes the claim that Moses did not need to have or say a prayer, the same as Habakkuk. It was God's covenant with Moses that he would speak the Lord's words without knowing what they would be prior to saying them. In the many cases of the plagues as described in the preceding passages of the Shemot, God decreed that the words spoke to Pharaoh by Moses would come to pass. Whatever Moses could think of to torment the Pharaoh, he would simply say, and Hashem would make it happen. He could have said nearly anything, and it would have happened. Thus, Moses truly did not need to pray and meditate prior to prophesying, just as Shimon Bar Yoshi says in verse 24. Habakkuk needed to pray in order to draw upon himself the spirit of prophecy, enhanced by the ascending of Chesed and Gevurah being balanced with the beauty of Teferet, arisen from the foundation of Melech. Moses, on the other hand, did not need to go through this preparatory phase, the same as Elisha, Habakkuk, and others. Rashbi points out that Moses did not need to perform Kabbalistic rites or rituals or prayer and meditation because he was ascended constantly. Moses was empowered by the Spirit of Hashem, and the divine presence of Sheshanah was with him, as it is written, they fled Egypt on the wings of an eagle, which is the beauty of Sheshanah's protection. Moses did not have a plan of his own, so there was no trickery involved where he plotted against the Israelites. He had no plot. The only plan Moses had was to listen to God's instructions, and he did not need to stop what he was doing to perform any special ritual. The same as the fake priests of Pharaoh had to do. They were not able to stop or cause the plagues that Moses called forth upon them because they did not know any magic or secret rituals to evoke these miracles. The three priests of Pharaoh were fakes, equating a statement that clearly refers to the distance between Canaan and Egypt to an oath earlier made between Abraham and the Philistines through Abimelech. It does ring true that the path of the Israelites would be to avoid any dispute with the Philistines, as Abraham had promised. Although it would have been a shorter route to go through the land of the Philistines because that was near, it was a matter of keeping Abraham's oath to treat the Philistines to the kindnesses that they did to him when making peace over the ownership and usage of a well. Okay, so the Israelites did not encroach the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines did not assist Pharaoh or attack them as they fled Egypt. Rashi's point becomes clear to those who question his ending with the facts. The relationship between the choices Moses made and the choices Elijah made are opposite in nature. Moses was a truly divinely inspired prophet who was in the presence of Sheshanah for the duration of the exit until the Lord released him at Etam. Elisha needed to invoke the Spirit of God by his physical attempt to resuscitate the boy. Habakkuk invoked the spirit of prophecy by prayer and meditation, which were the common characteristics for most other prophets, although it is not as clearly stated for others as it was for Habakkuk. It does not exclude Moses from needing to pray, to invoke the presence of the divine light. He clearly does constantly, but the text describes Moses as having a conversation with God, as if he were standing right there in front of him at the tent of meeting. Moses did not pray in the same manner as other men of God, because God was with him as the divine presence. as it was for Abraham and Lot. The angel of the Lord was with Moses. The difference between Moses and Elisha is that Moses was divinely led as a prophet, but Elisha was a prophet who divined the Spirit of the Lord with his piety. Habakkuk was also a prophet who practiced divination through prayer, but Elijah was portrayed as a necromancer for his actions to revive the boy. The Elisha passage is the most controversial of all tales of the lives of the prophets because no other patriarch was able to resurrect the dead. The real peculiarity is not that Habakkuk prayed, but that Elijah resurrected the dead. Shemot clearly concludes that the drawing of the spirit of prophecy through prayer is the same for all the other prophets except for Moses. Moses talked directly to God, bypassing prayer. At the end of the Shemot, the cloud and the pillar of fire are upon the tabernacle by day and night when the Israelites were to be stationary. When the cloud of fire were no longer on the tabernacle by day and night, the Israelites deconstructed the tabernacle and nomadically traveled until Moses commanded them to reconstruct it. If the cloud and fire returned to the tabernacle after it was completed, then the Israelites stayed until it left again. They continued moving for 39 years after the completion of the tabernacle, at the end of the first year in the wilderness. The entire tabernacle and the ark were made with materials that were capable of passing electrical current. Even vessels of oil could have been capable of storing electrical energy if electricity from a static electric discharge reached them somehow through the tabernacle's many metallic parts and connections. The entire description of the tabernacle could be the architecture of an electrically conductive structure, capable of conducting the discharges of lightning and storing that energy so that it would continue to discharge as sparks or a glow at night. It would not be possible to even get close to the tabernacle in a charged and discharging state, which is why they couldn't even, not even Moses could go near it. In fact, the only way it could be approached after being energized is for all the stored energy to be released. The cloud and the fire would no longer be there, keeping anyone from touching it. If anyone touched any part of the tabernacle while it was energized and discharging, that person would be killed. The proof of how the story and description of the tabernacle are truthful is in the finality of the Shemot. Once completed, the Lord energized it and dwelled there. When God was upon the tabernacle and in its construction as a holy and completely spiritual energy, the power of the energy repelled anyone who was not permitted to go near it. The design of the priest's garments and turban are likely to have been grounding any discharges of energy, and they walked barefoot also. The metal and fabrics were similar to having the characteristics of woven grounding straps commonly used to ensure ground for electrical machinery when high voltages are present or created by its design. The design of the tabernacle and all of what was in it, to include the priestly garments, are similar to the type of modern day electrical grid in an ordinary home, to include the wiring of furnaces and appliances. The tabernacle was the house of the Lord, who is pure spiritual energy that would rest within an abode made for God's comfort. Even acacia wood is an electrical insulator, and it is also semiconducting, relevant to its moisture content. In other words, it can pass electrical current when wet or used to insulate current when dry. Very few other types of wood do this. Moses and the Israelites constructed the first ever electrically conductive energy collecting and storing portable and cellulose rechargeable battery. The voltage it could store made it sufficient for the Lord's presence as a temporary habitation, and there would never be any possible duplication of the construction after God no longer needed it at the end of David's reign as King of Israel. The permanent temple would replace the tabernacle, but it was only a mobile home. On the next episode, we'll continue on with the Yetro chapter. We're going to look more at Yetro and what really is going on there, the way we looked at what's really going on here with this discussion by Shemot Bar Yoshi. So, we know that Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt to the southeast by following this fire at night and a smoke cloud in the day, instead of going straight across the Sinai and into Israel. Now, alright, until next time, I am Michael, and we'll see you next time on Torah and